Good morning, everyone. We are the Group 8 from BSc 2A. The topic that are given to us was the Moro Conflict. So the presenters for this topic are Clark Almedina and Yvonne Sarmiento for historical background, Marcos Dueñas and John Benceralde for content and analysis, Pauline Hinyalope and Cara Giananga for contribution, relevance, and references. So to start the discussion for Moro conflict, first we discuss the history of Moro conflict that will be presented by Mr. Clark Almedina.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. And Mystery of Moro Conflict. The overview of our report is all about the search of peace and human rights, the roots of the conflicts, and the peace initiatives. So what is Moro Conflict? Moro Conflict, with almost 40 years of on and off fighting between the Muslim armed opposition groups and the Philippine military forces, and the resulting high toll on human lives. The search for sustainable peace and full respect for human rights remains a big challenge. So, the Moro conflict started in the year 1960 when the Moro National Liberation Front, or MNLF, started to advocate about the Moro homeland. And after nun, nagkaroon ng panibagong opposition group ang Philippine military, which is the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF. And let's always remember that yung dalawang group na yon ay magkaibang grupo, at meron pa ring mas maliliit na grupo na nag-exist sa kanilang lugar na nagkakos ng crossfire, na nag-cause din ng displacement ng civilian, including the Christian and the Muslims. And unfortunately nag-cause din siya ng human lives. So please proceed.
So to emphasize their deep sense of independence as people, many Muslims in Mindanao collectively call themselves as Moro, the word used by colonial Spanish government to refer to the Muslim people. This extends to the use of word Bangsamoro or Moro nation to indicate a people separate from the rest of the Philippine population. So generally, Moro conflict is multifaceted, highly complex matter emanating from centuries of proven societal fragmentation and divisions. In the decades since the conflict began, the Philippine government, with the aid from international mediators, civil societies, and non-governmental organizations, has drafted and reached various accords with Moro non-state armed groups, namely the Moro National Liberation Front and Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which was mentioned by Mr. Clark Almedina. So to more detail and comprehend the root cause of Moro conflict, we have the next reporter to further discuss what really happened in Moro conflict. So that would be all to our part. Thank you.
So good day everyone. I'm your reporter Marcos Dueñas, and let us now talk about the content and analysis. So to help you better understand the Moro conflict, let me give you a small timeline of what are the events that transpired. So this is the historical timeline. Now take note, there are more events that transpired in the conflict than those that are listed here. These are just the events that I picked based on what I think is the most relevant among them. So this all began from its root cause that happened during the late 1890s, where the Muslims in the Philippines revolutionized against United States. So the foundations of the modern conflict can actually be traced to the Spanish and American wars against the Moros. On August 14, 1898, after defeating the Spanish forces, the United States claimed the Philippines as its territory under the Treaty of Paris, but the Muslims revolutionized against this. Next is the Jabida Massacre, which is the origin of insurgency that happened during late, March 1968. So this is the main event that started the Moro Conflict. Eh, there has been an insurgency or an uprising of multiple armed factions, mainly the MNLF and the MILF, in which I will explain further later. So the next ones are the MNLF peace agreements 1996 and the MILF peace agreement that happened during January 2014. So the MNLF or the Moro National Liberation Front and the MILF or the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, two significant armed factions, and the Philippine government have reached peace agreements after many massacres and battles. However, numerous smaller groups that are armed are still active until this day. And this will also be explained further later. The next one is the Mangsamoro Organic Law during the July 2018. This is the law that Duterte signed, which abolished the autonomous region of in Muslim Mindanao and provided for the basic structure of a government for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. But more on this later as well. And the present, which is the ongoing, uh, this is the part of the normalization process of the Bangsamoros war to peace transition. Now let me further explain the root cause. The Moro conflict is associated in a long history of resistance by the Bangsamoro people against foreign rule. So the Moro people actually have a long history of resistance against foreign rule for more than 400 years. This includes the American annexation of the Philippines during 1898, which I mentioned earlier. Moro resistance against the Philippines government has persisted ever since. And during the administration of Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos, political tensions and open hostilities developed between the Philippine government and Moro Muslim rebel groups. So, the Jabida Massacre. The Moro insurgency was triggered by the Jabida Massacre on March 18, 1968, during which 60 Filipino Muslims commandos on a planned operation to reclaim the eastern part of the Malaysian state of Sabah were killed. So this is the major flashpoint and the active phase of the Moro conflict and is attributed to news about the Jabida massacre in March 1968 towards the end of the first term of Ferdinand Marcos. Uh, a Senate expose based on the testimony of an alleged survivor claimed that at least 11 Filipino Muslim military trainees had been killed in Corregidor by soldiers of the armed forces of the Philippines. Uh, the news about the the news about this actually created unrest among the Filipino Muslims, especially among students. Both Muslim and intellectuals and common people suddenly became politicized and discrediting the idea of finding integration and accommodation with the rest of the country and creating a sense of marginalization. So the Moro National Liberation Front or the MNLF, these various organizations pushing for Moro self-rule, either through autonomy or independence, were soon formed. And one of these is the MIM, uh, or the Muslim Independence Movement, which openly called for secession of the region to create a Muslim state, although this didn't last long. And on October 21, 1972, University of the Philippines professor Nur Miswari formed the MNLF, which created the establishment of a Moro Republic through the force of arms. And this attracted many members of the MIM who broke away. And next one is the MILF or the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. And during the 1978, Sheikh Salamat Hashim established the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and this is a splinter group of the MNLF and seeking to establish a Islamic state. So, conflicts between these rebel groups and the armed forces of the Philippines continued until the end of President Marcos' rule. And from 1972 to 1980, at least 50,000 people were killed during the conflict. 1 million people were internally displaced. More than 100,000 uh, Philippine Muslims fled by boat to Malaysia. And this is all for my report. And the next one is the peace agreements that will be further explained by John Benseralde. Thank you.
So for the continuation of the content and analysis, my name is John Van Amseralde and I'll be explaining the peace agreements within the Moro conflict. So may nag-exist na dalawang peace agreement within the Moro conflict. The first one is the Moro National Liberated Front Peace Agreement, which was signed back on September 2, 1996. So it was under the presidency of Fidel Ramos. So it is defined as the culmination of 4 years of peace talks. The agreement established mechanisms designed to bring about the full implementation of the 1976 Tripoli Agreement. So the 1976 Tripoli Agreement served as the head start for the peace agreement. So under the presidency of Ferdinand Marcos, the 1976 Tripoli Agreement was signed. It aimed to establish a autonomous government other than the government of Ferdinand Marcos himself. Also, it aims to establish a judicial system, security forces, as well as the observance of ceasefire. So when the MNLF peace agreement was signed, medyo naging para sa ibang members ng armed faction, medyo naging downfall ito para sa kanila. So as a result, gumawa sila ng bagong grupo which is called the MILF or the Moro Islamic Liberated Front. So as a result, nagkaroon ng on and off tension between the government and the armed faction itself. So the government really tried its best para magkaroon ng peace talks, and it was not until March 27, 2014 na nagkaroon muli nito. So the Moro Islamic Liberated Front Peace Agreement of 2014 covers the details of the creation of a new self-governing political entity called the Bangsamoro. So basically, the peace agreement of the MILF back in 2014 aimed to replace the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao. So it was not until the July 26, 2018 nung pinirmahan yung Bangsamoro Organic Law, or also known as the Republic Act number 11054. So the Bangsamoro Organic Law is known as the abolishment of the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao. So it was replaced by the Bangsamoro, which was uh, called uh, the BARMM. So it aims to establish a political entity, provide for the basic structure of the government. So the Bangsamoro Organic Law uh, wanted to provide the autonomous Bangsamoro government system a parliamentary slash democratic type of government. So medyo same yun sila nung pamamalakad yung government system na meron yung United Kingdom. And it is also based on a political party system. In addition, it also allows for meaningful self-governance. So therefore, kahit pa paano meron na silang freedom or control sa sarili nilang government. So that is the end of the content and analysis for the peace agreements within the Moro conflict. So let's now proceed to the relevance and contribution.
So let's proceed to the contribution and relevance of the Moro conflict. First is the peace agreement
between Moros and the Philippine government. So, in relation to the conflict between the Moros and the Philippine government, peace agreements have been a challenge. So, after how many decades, on July 23, 2018, former President Rodrigo Duterte signed Republic Act number 11054, or also known as the Bangsamoro Organic Law. So, its purpose has been discussed by the last presenter. Bangsamoro have contributed to the peace process between Moros and the Philippine government. Next is human rights has been or have been recognized. Because of what happened from the past, Moros and the Philippine government decided to totally end this conflict with the help of the Bangsamoro Organic Law, where the rights and the government of the Muslim Filipinos have been recognized by the Philippine government. The last two will be discussed by the next presenter.
Moro conflict was a long history, but basically it starts with a history of injustice and marginalization that was felt or perceived by the Moros. So the government of the Philippines, as what my co-reporter stated, has pursued peace negotiations with the Moro liberation groups in order to end the armed conflict, address the social, cultural, and economic inequities, and arrive at a viable political arrangement that will reconcile the ideals of moral self-government, good governance, and national sovereignty. So during these peace negotiations between two significant parties, the participations of women in the process of peace and development in Mindanao was highlighted. In relation to this, Mindanao women hold peace summit and over 100 women leaders from all over Mindanao converged. The summit was highlighted by the adoption of a position paper for the peace negotiation panels of the Philippine government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or the MILF. The Peace Summit was the culminating activity of a 6-month project which included community consultations organized by the Mindanao Commission on Women, or the MCW, among Moro and indigenous peoples women in conflict-affected areas in Cotabato City, Kapatagan, Iligan City, Marawi City, Cabacan, Basilan, and Hulu. The consultations encourage women members and supporters of the MILF and the Moro National Liberation Front to air their views on the peace process. So from there, makikita natin na binibigyang pansin ang suhestyon ng mga kababaihan ukol sa usaping kapayapaan sa pagitan ng Moros at ng Philippine government. Kaya sinasabing yung conflict between the government and the Moros ay isang pagpapatunay na ang mga kababaihan ay higit pa sa pagiging babae lamang. Kasi kung mapapansin natin, 'di ba, kapag usaping war or digmaan, may iisip agad natin na ang mga lalaki ang may malaking responsibilidad at kontribusyon sa pagkamit ng kapayapaan. Ngunit sa conflict na ito ng Moros at ng Philippine government, naipakita na malaki ang naging kontribusyon ng mga kababaihan ng Mindanao dahil sila ang isa sa mga nanguna sa pagkakaroon ng peace agreement upang bigyang wakas ang napakahaba at walang tigil na gulo sa Mindanao na naging dahilan ng pagkawalan ng maraming buhay. So, men have noticed that women are more meticulous when it comes to drafting. That is why if the other agreements and the final peace agreement were to be compared, it's a really more detailed, elegantly crafted that provides more guidance when it comes to implementation. So I think that that kind of attention to details was really an input from the women, and not just on the side of the government, but also on the side of their counterpart. And lastly, as for the importance and relevance of knowing and understanding the historical injustice suffered by the Philippines Moro community, will provide us a better understanding of the aspirations of the Bangsamoro people, and their appeal for genuine self-autonomy is through proper education and accurate research on the Philippine Moro history. Kaya 'di ba kapag pinag-uusapan ang tungkol sa conflict between Moros and the government, ina-assume agad nating mga walang sapat na kaalaman sa mga nangyari na yung mga Moros ang may kasalanan o pasimuno without even knowing the reason of their struggles, and that the prejudice comes first. So we as the youth have to study their history, research the accurate information, read reliable learning materials, and get to know the facts, because through this we will break the misconceptions that we have against the Moro people. It will provide us as young Filipinos a broader perspective of the past and help reinforce Filipino identity and promote national unity. So before I end our presentation, I would like to take this chance to share a quote that I've read somewhere on the internet stating that a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. These are the list of references that we got our informations and details about our report. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something valuable from us.